Namaste. Welcome, beautiful souls, to this ongoing conversation regarding the Arthurian tarot decks. And the one deck that inspired this series is Legend, the Arthurian Tarot by Anna Marie Ferguson. And in this discussion, I am also including and reading the guidebooks for the Matthews Arthurian deck, as well as Claire Duval's beautiful deck that is illustrated by Arthurian. And last week I looked at the Empress, and this week it is all about Arthur and the Emperor. And I have to say that this card is no different than the Magician, the High Priestess, or the Empress in regards to the layered nature of this legend, of this archetype, of this character known as Arthur. There are many aspects of this rich character, and I think that will provide some freedom in interpretation of this card, in that it's not just an emperor card, but a particular story may come through when you're doing a reading, or you may have a particular association through one of the other cards in the deck. And I think that these layered and rich characters could build some really interesting readings. And I would like, when I get a little further on in the series, to do that, to do some practice readings with this deck or one of the other ones as well. And so here, this is a very richly colored card. I mentioned last week that a lot of the cards almost look, or in previous weeks, that a lot of the cards almost look as though there's a veil over them, right? It's kind of hard to see what's happening, or it might be an intentional filter. And these are paintings, of course, right? They're not computer generated with filters on them. But it looks as if in some pictures, some paintings, there is a filter that creates a haze of mystery. And here, a confident Arthur sits in the seat of power. He is comfortable, yet aware of his surroundings and his crucial role. Arthur holds the scepter and orb, though I can't quite see it in this image, confirmations of his sovereignty. The scepter also symbolizes his potency, the orb, his fame and feminine principles. Arthur's relaxed body language makes him seem approachable. His competence to rule is that of a true king, not a fallacy of pomp and ceremony. The king's capacity to rule comes from deep within him, a truth and strength which seem to hang in the very air around him. The light of the torch falls upon the king, recalling that he is an enlightened leader. And I just want to pause here because I'm hearing this word king, 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 and this is an emperor card. And one of the questions, especially new tarot students often ask, is, well, what's the difference between the kings and the emperor? And I want you to remember, as a new tarot student, if you are, that the emperor and the empress and the magician, these are archetypes. And like the many layers of these characters, they are a representative of a huge body of unconscious and universal knowledge that we all can relate to. They are less specific in their designation, if that helps at all. The light of the torch falls upon the king, recalling that he is an enlightened leader. His rich robe denotes wealth and security. The color red, coupled with the shield, represent courage and his readiness to defend the kingdom. The eagle symbolizes the soul and his ability to rise above a situation, see both sides, and make a fair judgment. The ram heads represent his stamina, passion, and ambition. The dragons carved in the back of the throne symbolize primitive power. Arthur is the Pendragon, head dragon, who vows a sacred marriage to the land. Though Arthur is loved by his people, he is also envied. The open door indicates that there are those who, if given the opportunity, would have his crown. The king must be aware of all that occurs in his court and all that is done in his name. And so you might want to compare the Arthur cards. The direction of facing may be significant. I think traditionally you'll see that the Emperor is not forward facing. The Emperor is usually in this direction, so that may have a significance for you. Facings can indicate what is capturing the attention of the card, what they are looking at. It talks about relationship with other cards, backs to something. Very interesting that Arthur is turned in this direction in the Cashleen and John Matthews deck. And I think this is something as a tarot reader, depending on your experience and the amount of research you have done with the energy of readings, reading them right to left or left to right. It's a many layered level of study, and rather than getting worked up about which way is forward and which way is past, I think the idea of backs to backs facing each other is the easiest way, at least, to approach this. But it's kind of interesting just to note that this is more of a traditional direction for the Emperor. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be chainmail, or the idea here is that the Emperor is wearing a tunic that looks like the scales of a dragon and the name that he stands for. And from the Ferguson book, most historians now agree that Arthur, or the man we call Arthur, did exist. If not as king, then at least as military leader. He was a magnetic man and military mastermind whose war band grew with his fame. Arthur is probably the general who led the Britons to victory at the famous Battle of Mount Badon. With this decisive victory, the invading Saxons were kept at bay, bringing relative peace to the land. Thus, the title of king was likely bestowed upon the heroic Arthur by the storytellers of the Grateful Isle. They would also add to his fame and grandeur with a wealth of fantastic tales, and this is mentioned as well too in the Matthews book. A romanticized Arthur of legend was born to Uther and Igraine at Tintagel in Cornwall. The newborn was given to Merlin as part of a pact between the magician and the king. Merlin then placed the young Arthur in the foster care of Sir Ector. Here, with his foster brother Kay, Arthur received an education and learned the arts of war. Despite thinking himself someone's unwanted bastard, these were happy, carefree days for Arthur. When the time came for Arthur to succeed his father, Merlin arranged for the nobles to meet for a tournament. Though there had been rumors that Uther had fathered a son, no one was certain of his existence. The tournament's victors won the right to attempt to pull a sword from a stone. This was a rite by which the people believed the gods made known the rightful king of the land. It was in this setting, with all eyes upon him, that the 15-year-old Arthur pulled the sword from the stone. Merlin then told Arthur and the dazed onlookers that he was the child of the High King Uther Pendragon and his queen Igraine. In the early days of his reign, Arthur remained under the watchful eye of Merlin, successfully overcoming the initial opposition of some disgruntled lesser kings and setting out to unite his fellow countrymen against the Saxon threat. Despite his youth, Arthur was an exemplary warrior, and as time wore on, he proved to be a great leader, dispelling any doubts regarding his prowess and authority. Arthur was a fair and courageous man, but capable of making harsh decisions when necessary. His warlike nature was balanced with kindness and humor. His talent for verse, particularly satirical verse, made him a favorite among the bards. The early battles of Arthur and his war band were severe but successful, culminating with the victory of Mount Badon. The now confident and perhaps somewhat jealous Arthur announced that he would dig up the head of Bran, which lay buried on Tower Hill in London. The people believed Bran's head to be a talisman protecting the isle from outsiders, while to Arthur it was a long-dead competitor, mere superstition, and a thorn in his side. He asserted that it was his campaign, not a charm, that protected the land. Arthur exhumed the head, thereby declaring his own supremacy. This act did not sit well with everyone, and some would blame later troubles on this misdeed. The king then turned his attention to rebuilding and reorganizing the country. At this time he married Guinevere, who some maintain was his second wife. Welsh tradition names 3 sons of Arthur. It is not known whether the first son was legitimate, but the latter 2 were not, and all died before their father. According to legend, Guinevere brought Arthur the round table, which had belonged to Uther as part of her dowry. The round table held both a mystical and a practical appeal, unifying all while honoring no man above the rest. With this, the Fellowship of the Round Table was born, and so began the many adventures of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. And from the Matthew's book, the divine or heroic elements within his role are amplified by tradition. Whenever he, Arthur, attempts to depart from his kingly responsibilities within the legends, or to live a life of his own, he comes to grief. Where he fulfills the duties of a king, he is given the support and assistance of the goddess of sovereignty. She is his foster mother who instructs him in wisdom, and she brings him the kingship. She provides him with a wife and eventually receives him to her again in the Isle of Avalon, from whence prophecy says he will return to defend the land once more. And as I read these words and scan the Duval guidebook here, I'm thinking about this particular archetype in terms of Dharma, in terms of one's divine purpose. I'm not sure that I have thought of the Emperor in that way before. If you've been following me for some time, you've heard me speak about the suit of wands as the suit of Dharma. It's a very different energy from the suit of pentacles. And so I'm thinking this is a fiery energy, often connected to Aries. It is certainly the suit of wands in the minor decans, if you're connecting it in that way. It is a martial energy if you're reading it in terms of ruler of Aries. And so, yes, this right, this dharma to be a soldier, to be a leader, to be an emperor might just be a way to connect with the Emperor card in a very personal way. And there's a couple of lines here, page 68 in Claire Duval's book, where she says, "You are the sovereign of your personal domain." You are the sovereign of your personal domain. And there was a similar sentence in the Empress card. And yet, one is clearly fire, and one is a more receptive and feminine energy. And so these two cards really do reflect our power and our ability to guide and to lead. It's really well done. And I also like the way that she describes, or she says something to the effect of that this is a beautiful card for capturing and defending and standing up for your ideas. And she doesn't say purpose, but I think I can build that in there. So, as a reflection for this week, maybe think about your sovereignty as fire energy versus your sovereignty as receptive energy, and how you relate to and stand in either of those. Can you connect better with one than the other? There's a beautiful dance between the energy of the Empress and the Emperor, and the way they are indeed counterparts to each other that may not necessarily be as separable as one would perceive on the surface. And particularly if you are stepping into a role of leadership or taking a new direction in your life at this time, you may find new purpose and support in a card such as this. So thank you in advance for adding to this discussion. And I'll see you in the next episode for the Hierophant card. Take good care of yourselves. Namaste.